on a frozen train platform, humiliated in front of an entire frontier town. The man who paid for her journey just rejected her like damaged goods. She has no money, nowhere to go, and winter is closing in fast. But when a widowed carpenter with two broken children offers her shelter, neither of them realizes they're about to ignite the biggest scandal Red Hollow has ever seen. This is a story about survival, second chances, and fighting for the family you choose, not the one you're sold to. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The train's whistle cut through the February air like a knife through bone. Eliza Mercer pressed her gloved hand against the frosted window, watching the landscape transform from rolling farmland into something harder, meaner. The Montana Territory didn't ease you into its brutality. It just was, all jagged rock faces and skeletal trees clawing at a sky the color of old pewter. She'd been traveling for 6 days. 6 days of stale bread, suspicious looks from other passengers, and nights spent sitting upright because lying down felt too vulnerable. Her carpet bag sat at her feet, everything she owned crammed inside. 3 dresses, a photograph of her mother, a worn Bible she never read but couldn't throw away. And the letters. Those goddamn letters. Dearest Eliza, I am a man of simple means but honest work. Red Hollow is rough country, but a woman of character could make a good life here. I own my land outright and have prospects for expansion. She'd read them so many times the paper had gone soft at the creases. Silas Grady wrote like a man who'd learned his words from books, all formal and proper. In her tiny room in Philadelphia, working 14-hour days at the textile mill, those letters had felt like a ladder out of a pit. Now, watching the train slow as it approached Red Hollow, Eliza wondered if she'd just climbed into a different kind of hole. The platform was busier than she'd expected. Maybe 30 people milled around in the cold, men in heavy coats and battered hats, a few women with their faces wrapped in scarves, children darting between legs like ferrets. The buildings behind them looked like they'd been thrown up in a hurry and never quite finished. Raw lumber, unpainted facades. Even the church steeple listed slightly to the left. Eliza stood, smoothing her traveling dress. It was her best one. Dark green wool with black trim, carefully mended at the cuffs where the fabric had worn thin. She'd pinned her hair up that morning, though 6 days of train travel had reduced the careful arrangement to something more desperate. The conductor appeared at her shoulder. "Red Hollow, miss. All out for Red Hollow." Her hand shook as she gathered her bag. This was it. In a few minutes, she'd meet the man she'd agreed to marry. Silas Grady. Her future. The cold hit her like a fist when she stepped down onto the platform. It wasn't Philadelphia cold, damp and sneaky, working through your clothes. This was Western cold, honest and mean, the kind that burned your lungs and made your teeth ache. Eliza pulled her thin coat tighter, knowing it wasn't nearly enough. The other passengers scattered quickly, claimed by waiting family or heading toward the buildings with purpose. Eliza stood there, bag at her feet, scanning the crowd for a man who matched the description in the letters. Tall, fair-haired, clean-shaven. A man approached, but he was short and barrel-chested, his beard reaching halfway down his chest. "You the new girl for the Golden Rose?" He looked her up and down with an expression that made her skin crawl. "No." She stepped back. "I'm meeting someone." "Sure you are." He wandered off, laughing. More minutes passed. The platform emptied. Eliza's toes had gone numb inside her boots. Then she saw him. He stood near the ticket office, talking to 2 other men, tall, fair-haired, clean-shaven. He wore a good coat, not new, but well-made, and his boots looked expensive. Even from a distance, she could tell he carried himself like someone who mattered in this town. Eliza picked up her bag and walked toward him, heart hammering. This was Silas. Had to be. The description matched perfectly. "Mr. Grady?" The 3 men turned. The tall one looked at her, and something flickered across his face. Not recognition, not welcome, confusion. "Can I help you?" His voice was flat, polite the way you're polite to strangers you don't plan to know better. She swallowed. "I'm Eliza Mercer, from Philadelphia. We've been corresponding?" The confusion sharpened into something else, something worse. One of the other men, older with a salt and pepper beard, started to smile. Not a nice smile. "Jesus Christ, Silas," he said. "She actually came." Silas Grady's face went red, then white. He glanced around the platform, fewer people now, but still a dozen within earshot. When he looked back at Eliza, there was no warmth in his eyes, no curiosity, nothing but calculation and something that looked like anger. Miss Mercer. He said her name like it tasted bad. There's been a misunderstanding. The world tilted slightly. I don't understand. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. Your letters were written in a moment of... He paused, choosing his words carefully. The other men were watching now, openly interested. Weakness. I've since reconsidered the arrangement. Reconsidered, she repeated the word stupidly. The truth is, Silas straightened his shoulders, and Eliza realized with sick clarity that he was about to perform. This wasn't a private conversation. It was a public declaration. I've recently become engaged to Margaret Hale, a local woman, someone appropriate to my station. The salt and pepper man laughed outright now. Eliza's bag slipped from her numb fingers and hit the platform with a thud. You wrote to me 3 weeks ago. You sent money for the train fare. I sent $40. Silas's voice cut across hers, louder now, making sure everyone could hear. Which I'm not asking to be returned. Consider it payment for your trouble. But the arrangement is terminated. I'm sure you can find work in town. The boarding house takes in laundry, I believe. Someone behind her snickered. The full weight of it crashed over her then. She'd left everything. Quit her job at the mill. Given up her room. Spent the last of her savings on a decent dress and a train ticket west. All on the promise of a man who was now looking at her like she was a piece of freight delivered to the wrong address. You can't... Her throat closed up. I have nowhere to go. That's unfortunate. Silas didn't sound like he found it unfortunate at all. But it's not my concern. The arrangement was contingent on mutual satisfaction, and I'm not satisfied. He said it deliberately, loudly, making sure everyone heard that he was rejecting her, not the other way around. The older man clapped Silas on the shoulder. Come on, Margaret's waiting at the hotel. They walked away. Just like that. Eliza stood frozen on the platform, her carpet bag at her feet, while the remaining bystanders stared. A woman in a fox fur collar whispered something to her companion. 2 men by the freight office weren't even trying to hide their interest. Her face burned despite the cold. Every eye felt like a brand. Don't cry. She locked her jaw. Don't you dare cry in front of these people. She bent to pick up her bag, movement stiff and mechanical. Her hands had gone past cold into something beyond feeling. When she straightened, she had no idea where to go. The train was already pulling away, black smoke trailing behind it like a funeral shroud. The boarding house. Silas had mentioned a boarding house. Eliza turned toward the main street, bag clutched in her frozen hands. She made it 3 steps before a voice stopped her. Miss. She turned. A man stood a few yards away, tall, broad across the shoulders, wearing a canvas coat that had seen hard use. He was maybe 30, with dark hair that needed cutting and a face that looked like it didn't smile often. Sawdust clung to his sleeves. You need somewhere to go? He asked. Eliza's first instinct was to say no, to brush past him and preserve whatever scraps of dignity she had left. But dignity didn't keep you warm at night, and she had exactly $40 minus train fare to her name. The boarding house, she managed. It's full. He said it plainly, no satisfaction in delivering bad news. Been full for 2 weeks. Mining company brought in a survey crew. Of course it was full. I see. She didn't see. She didn't see anything except the next few hours stretching into a nightmare of begging strangers for help or freezing in some alley. Thank you for telling me. She started walking again, no destination in mind now, just movement because standing still meant acknowledging how completely fucked she was. My name's Rowan Vale. She stopped but didn't turn around. I've got a cabin about 2 miles outside town, he continued. 2 bedrooms. I'm there with my kids, but there's a room you could use, temporarily, until you figure things out. Now she turned. Why would you do that? He looked at her for a long moment. Because I watched what just happened, and it was horseshit. The bluntness of it startled a laugh out of her, short and bitter. That's one word for it. You got people you can wire for money? Family back east? No. The word came out harder than she meant. No family. Rowan nodded slowly, like that explained something. The offer stands. It's not charity. I work long hours at the mill and the kids need looking after. You could help with that. Cooking, mending, whatever needs doing, room and board in exchange. Eliza studied him. He didn't look like a man with ulterior motives. His gaze was direct but not assessing. Not the way Silas's had been. Not the way the man with the beard had looked at her. Just tired. Practical. I don't know you, she said. True enough. For all I know, you could be worse than him. She jerked her head toward where Silas had disappeared. Could be. Rowan shifted his weight. But right now you don't have a lot of options, and it's going to be dark in about 3 hours. He was right. God help her. He was completely right. What are your kids' names? The question seemed to catch him off guard. Caleb's 10. Ivy just turned 6. And their mother? Dead, 2 years ago. The flatness in his voice when he said it told her everything. This wasn't a man looking for a replacement wife. This was someone just trying to get through the days. Eliza took a breath. If I do this, if I come with you, I want to be clear. I'm not available for anything beyond helping with your children and your house. I won't be pushed into something I don't agree to. Understood. And if it doesn't work out, you'll bring me back to town. No questions. I will. She looked down at her carpet bag, at her frozen hands gripping the handles. Every sensible bone in her body screamed that going with a strange man to an isolated cabin was insane. But staying here, begging for work in a town that had just watched her humiliation, sleeping in barns or worse, that felt more dangerous somehow. All right, she heard herself say. All right. Rowan's shoulders relaxed slightly. I've got a wagon around the corner. You can wait here or come with me to get it. I'll come. They walked in silence through Red Hollow's main street. The town was bigger than it had looked from the platform. 2 rows of buildings facing each other across a wide dirt road. General store, bank, hotel, saloon, blacksmith, another saloon. Everything looked new and old at the same time, hastily built but already weathering badly. People stared as they passed. Of course they did. News traveled fast in small towns, and a woman getting publicly rejected was probably the most interesting thing that had happened all month. The wagon was behind the feed store, a sturdy buckboard with a roan gelding hitched to it. Rowan took her bag and stowed it in the back with the casual efficiency of someone used to physical work. Then he offered his hand to help her up. Eliza hesitated only a second before taking it. His palm was calloused, grip firm but not crushing. The kind of hand that built things. Once she was settled, Rowan climbed up beside her and took the reins. The wagon lurched into motion, wheels creaking over frozen ruts. They left Red Hollow behind without ceremony. The road wound through sparse forest, pine and aspen, their branches bare and skeletal. Mountains loomed in the distance, snow-capped and indifferent. The temperature seemed to drop with every mile. Tell me about your children, Eliza said finally, because the silence was becoming oppressive. Rowan didn't take his eyes off the road. Caleb's angry. Has been since his mother died. He's not going to make this easy on you. And Ivy? Too young to be as sad as she is. He said it quietly, almost to himself. She doesn't talk much. Used to chatter all the time, but now she's real quiet. Eliza processed this. You're very honest about them. No point in lying. You'll see for yourself soon enough. Do they know I'm coming? No. That's going to be a pleasant surprise. The corner of Rowan's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. I don't do many things that are pleasant surprises. The cabin appeared as they rounded a bend, a solid structure of dark timber with a stone chimney set back in a clearing. Smoke rose from the chimney in a thin gray line. A small barn stood to one side, and behind it she could see what looked like a work shed. It looked lonely. That was the word that came to her. Not poor, not run down, just profoundly lonely. Rowan pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the cabin. Before he could move, the front door opened. A boy stood in the doorway. Caleb. Had to be. Tall for 10, all sharp angles and wary eyes. He looked at the wagon, at his father, then at Eliza. His expression hardened immediately. Who's that? His voice carried across the clearing, flat and hostile. Rowan climbed down from the wagon. Come help with the supplies. I asked who that is. And I told you to come help with the supplies. Rowan's voice didn't rise, but something in it made Caleb move. The boy descended the porch steps slowly, radiating resentment with every step. Rowan came around to help Eliza down. Her legs had gone stiff from the cold ride, and she stumbled slightly. His hand steadied her elbow. Caleb, this is Miss Mercer. She's going to be staying with us for a while. The boy stopped mid-reach for a crate. What? She'll be helping around the house, cooking, cleaning, looking after you and your sister. We don't need— Yes, Rowan interrupted. We do. Caleb's jaw worked. He grabbed the crate with more force than necessary and hauled it toward the cabin without another word. Eliza stood in the frozen yard, carpet bag in hand, watching this family that wasn't hers absorb the intrusion of her presence. Through the open door, she could see a small face peering out, pale and wide-eyed. Ivy. Come on, Rowan said. It's warmer inside. The interior of the cabin was dim and sparse. One large room served as kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. A rough-hewn table, 4 mismatched chairs, a few shelves holding dishes and dry goods. 2 doors led off the main room, bedrooms presumably. It was clean but cold, not temperature cold. The fire in the hearth put out decent heat. Cold in the way places get when nobody cares about them anymore. Nothing on the walls, no curtains, no softness anywhere. Ivy stood pressed against the far wall, partially hidden behind a chair. She was tiny, a wraith of a child with her mother's features, Eliza guessed, all delicate bones and light brown hair and uneven braids. Ivy, come say hello, Rowan prompted. The girl didn't move. It's all right, Eliza said quietly. She set her bag down and unbuttoned her coat with stiff fingers. I'm Eliza. I'm going to be staying here for a bit. Ivy's eyes were huge. She didn't speak. Caleb dumped the crate on the table with a crash. Where's she sleeping? The spare room. That's where Mama's things are. The temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. Rowan's expression didn't change, but Eliza saw his hands tighten slightly. I'll move them. Where? That's not your concern. Everything about Mama is my concern. Caleb, no. The boy's voice cracked. You can't just bring some random woman here, and I can, and I did. Rowan's voice stayed level. This is my house, my decision. You want to be angry about it, fine. But you'll be respectful, or you'll find yourself mucking out the barn until your hands bleed. Father and son stared at each other. Caleb looked like he wanted to say more, probably a lot more. But something in Rowan's face stopped him. He turned on his heel and stalked out the back door, slamming it hard enough to rattle the dishes. The silence that followed was excruciating. I'm sorry, Eliza said finally. This isn't— I should have thought about how difficult this would be for them. It's difficult for everyone. Rowan moved to the fireplace, adding another log. But it's necessary. I work 12-hour days at the mill, sometimes more. Caleb's supposed to watch Ivy, but he's 10. He shouldn't have to raise his sister. Still, you didn't create this situation. He turned to look at her. And you need a place to stay. Sometimes things work out because they have to, not because they're perfect. Eliza couldn't argue with that. Nothing about today had been perfect. Nothing about the last 6 days. Maybe nothing about her whole life. Let me show you the room, Rowan said. He led her to one of the doors off the main room. The space beyond was small but adequate. A narrow bed, a chest of drawers, a single window with a view of the tree line. And boxes. 3 wooden crates stacked in the corner, obviously hastily packed. I'll move these tonight, Rowan said. Put them in my room. Eliza caught a glimpse of fabric in one box. A dress, pale blue. You don't have to rush. Yes, I do. You need space that's yours. He left her there, pulling the door closed behind him. Eliza sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing her coat, and let herself shake for the first time since the platform. Not crying, just shaking. Her body catching up with what her mind had been holding at bay. She'd come west to marry a stranger and build a new life. Instead, she'd been rejected in front of a whole town and ended up in a widower's cabin, surrounded by children who resented her presence and grief so thick you could drown in it. The smart thing would be to leave in the morning. Wire someone, anyone, back east for money to get home. Except there was no home. There was nothing back there except the same grinding poverty that had driven her onto that train in the first place. Through the thin door, she heard Rowan's voice, low and steady, talking to Ivy. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was gentle. Eliza pulled off her gloves and looked at her hands. They were red and raw from the cold, nails broken from years of millwork. Not a lady's hands. Working hands. Fine. She'd work. If she was going to survive this, she'd earn her place. Make herself useful enough that they couldn't throw her out. It wasn't pride. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. It was pure survival. She stood and unpinned her hat, setting it carefully on the chest of drawers. Then she took off her coat, smoothed her dress, and opened the door. Rowan was at the stove, stirring something in a pot. Ivy sat at the table, swinging her legs. The back door was still closed. Caleb hadn't returned. "What can I do?" Eliza asked. Rowan glanced up, surprise flickering across his face. "You don't have to. You said room and board in exchange for help. I'd like to start earning my keep." He studied her for a moment, then gestured to the shelves. "Plates are up there. We'll need 4. Eliza moved to the shelves, stretching to reach the top one. The plates were mismatched, chipped in places. She set them on the table, spacing them evenly. "Forks in the drawer by the window," Rowan added. She found them, only 3 that matched. The 4th was smaller, probably from a different set. She laid them out anyway. Ivy watched her with those enormous eyes, not saying a word. "Do you want to help?" Eliza asked her gently. The little girl shook her head. "That's okay. You can just watch." Rowan ladled stew into a serving bowl. Venison, it smelled like, with potatoes and carrots. Simple, but decent. He set it in the center of the table, then went to the back door. "Caleb, supper." No response. Rowan's jaw tightened, but he didn't call again. He just returned to the table and sat down. They waited in silence. After 2 minutes, the back door opened and Caleb trudged in, smelling like cold air and horse. He didn't look at anyone as he took his seat. "Say grace," Rowan said. Caleb's head snapped up. "Why? We haven't said grace in 2 years. We're saying it now." "Because she's here?" The contempt in his voice was palpable. "Because I said so." Another staring contest. This time Caleb looked away first. He bowed his head, jaw clenched so tight Eliza could see the muscles jumping. Rowan kept it simple. "Thank you for this food and for safety under this roof. Amen." "Amen," Ivy whispered. They ate in brutal silence. The stew was good, better than Eliza had expected. Clearly, Rowan had been managing on his own for a while. But the atmosphere at the table was suffocating. Halfway through the meal, Ivy's fork clattered to the floor. The little girl froze, eyes going wide with something that looked like fear. "It's all right," Eliza said quickly. She bent to retrieve it. "Happens to everyone." Ivy didn't relax. Eliza got up and went to the drawer, fetching a clean fork. She brought it back and set it gently beside Ivy's plate. "There you go." The child stared at the fork like it was a foreign object. Caleb made a sound. Not quite a laugh, not quite a scoff. "She's not going to thank you. She doesn't talk much anymore." "Caleb," Rowan warned. "What? It's true. Ever since Mama—" "Enough." The boy subsided, radiating sullen anger. Eliza returned to her seat. She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. She just ate her stew and tried not to feel the weight of 3 pairs of eyes on her. One resentful, one wary, one calculating. After dinner, Rowan cleared the table while Eliza washed the dishes. He didn't try to make conversation, and she was grateful. Her reserves were depleted. Every smile, every gentle word to Ivy, every moment of enduring Caleb's hostility had drained her. When the dishes were done, Rowan sent the children to bed. Caleb went without argument, though he shot Eliza a look that could have stripped paint. Ivy hesitated, then darted forward and pressed something into Eliza's hand before running to her room. It was a small wooden horse, crudely carved but carefully sanded smooth. Eliza looked at Rowan. "I made that for her last year," he said quietly. "She doesn't usually share it. Should I give it back?" "No, she'll ask for it when she wants it." Eliza closed her fingers around the little horse, feeling its solid weight. The first gift she'd received since arriving in Montana was from a 6-year-old who didn't speak and a father who carved toys in whatever spare moments he could steal. "I'll say goodnight," she managed. "Sleep well, Miss Mercer." "Eliza, you can call me Eliza." He nodded once. Eliza. In her small room, Eliza unpacked her carpet bag by candlelight. She hung her dresses on pegs, arranged her meager toiletries on the chest, and placed her mother's photograph on the windowsill where she could see it. Then she sat on the bed, still holding Ivy's wooden horse, and finally let the tears come. Silent, exhausted tears that she pressed into her palms so nobody would hear. She cried for the future she'd imagined on the train, naive and stupid, but hers. She cried for the humiliation on the platform. She cried because she was so tired of being alone, of fighting just to exist, of never having anything soft or safe. And when the tears finally stopped, she wiped her face, set the wooden horse carefully on the chest of drawers, and blew out the candle. Tomorrow she'd figure out how to survive this. Tonight, she just needed to sleep. Outside, wind rattled the window panes. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. And in a cabin at the edge of a frontier town, 4 people who didn't belong together tried to find rest under the same roof. Eliza woke to the sound of an axe biting into wood. The room was still dark, just the barest hint of gray seeping through the window. She lay there for a moment, disoriented, before remembering where she was. The thin mattress beneath her, the rough wool blanket, the cold air that had crept in during the night, turning her breath to fog. Another crack of the axe. Steady, rhythmic. She pushed herself up, every muscle protesting. The train journey had left her stiff, and yesterday's tension had settled into her shoulders like iron. Her feet hit the cold floor and she gasped, jerking them back up. No rugs. Nothing between her and the bare wood. Moving quickly, she dressed in the dimness, her plainest dress, brown wool that wouldn't show dirt. Her fingers fumbled with the buttons. How long had it been since she'd slept in a room this cold? Even the boarding house in Philadelphia had been warmer than this. When she emerged from her room, the main cabin was empty. The fire in the hearth had burned down to embers. Through the window, she could see Rowan in the yard, splitting wood with mechanical precision. He'd already built a decent pile. Eliza went to the fireplace and knelt, studying the remains of last night's fire. She'd done this before, back when her mother was alive and they'd lived in that drafty apartment above the bakery. You didn't let a fire die completely if you could help it. Waste of matches. She found kindling in a box by the hearth and coaxed the embers back to life, adding larger pieces once the flames caught. The warmth felt like a small victory. The water bucket by the sink was frozen solid on top. She took it outside, breaking through the ice layer and dumping the contents into the yard. Rowan paused mid-swing, looking over at her. "Well's around back," he said. "Pump's stubborn in the morning. You have to work it." "All right." She found the pump where he'd said, an old iron thing that looked like it predated the cabin. She set the bucket down and grabbed the handle, pulling down hard. It resisted. She tried again, throwing her weight into it. On the 4th try, it grudged out a sputter of water. "Told you it was stubborn." She hadn't heard him approach. He stood a few feet away, axe resting against his shoulder. "I've dealt with worse," she said, pumping steadily now. The water came in reluctant spurts, ice-cold and clear. Rowan watched her for a moment. "You know how to make coffee?" "Yes." "Good. I'll finish this and be in shortly." He walked back to the woodpile, and Eliza carried the heavy bucket inside. Her arms shook by the time she set it on the counter. Jesus, when had she gotten this weak? 6 days sitting on a train, that's when. She found the coffee in a tin on the shelf. Good quality, better than she'd expected. The pot was cast iron, seasoned from years of use. She worked by instinct more than knowledge, measuring coffee grounds and water, setting the pot on the stove. While it heated, she explored the shelves more thoroughly. Flour, cornmeal, a jar of preserved apples. Dried beans, salt pork wrapped in cloth. Enough food, barely. Nothing fresh except the root vegetables in a crate under the counter. Potatoes, carrots, onions starting to sprout. The coffee began to bubble. The smell filled the cabin, rich and bitter. A door creaked behind her. Eliza turned to see Ivy standing in the doorway of the children's room, still in her nightgown. Her hair had escaped its braids during the night, hanging in tangles around her thin face. "Good morning," Eliza said softly. Ivy didn't respond. She just stood there, watching. "Are you hungry?" A small nod. "What do you usually have for breakfast?" No answer. Eliza waited, but the child remained silent. Finally, she turned back to the shelves. "How about oatmeal?" "I can make that." Another small nod. She found the oats and started a pot of water boiling. Ivy drifted to the table and climbed onto a chair, sitting with her knees pulled up to her chest. The wooden horse sat on the table in front of her. She must have retrieved it from Eliza's room while everyone slept. "Did you sleep well?" Eliza asked. Ivy's eyes followed her movements, but she didn't speak. The back door opened and Rowan came in, bringing a blast of cold air with him. He stomped his boots on the threshold, shedding snow and ice. "Smells good," he said, moving to the stove. Eliza poured coffee into 2 tin cups, handing him one. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, both of them pulling back slightly. "Thank you." He took a long drink, then looked at Ivy. "You get dressed before breakfast. You know the rule." The little girl slid off the chair and padded back to her room, the wooden horse clutched in one hand. "She doesn't talk?" Eliza asked once Ivy was out of earshot. "Not much. She used to." Rowan leaned against the counter, cup warming his hands. "After my wife died, she just stopped. She'll say a word here and there if she has to, but mostly she's quiet." "What happened to your wife?" It was too direct, Eliza realized as soon as the words left her mouth. Too personal for someone who'd been here less than a day. But Rowan didn't seem offended. He just stared into his coffee. "Fever. Came on fast. She was fine one day, dead 3 days later. Doctor said there was nothing anyone could have done." "I'm sorry." "Everyone's sorry." He said it without bitterness, just fact. Doesn't change anything. Ivy returned wearing a dress that was getting too small for her, the hem ending above her ankles. She'd attempted to rebraid her hair, but had only managed a lopsided mess. "Come here," Eliza said. "Let me fix that." The girl hesitated, then crossed to where Eliza stood. She was so small. Standing next to her, Eliza could see the delicate bones of her shoulders through the thin fabric, the way her wrists looked too fragile. Eliza's fingers worked through the tangles gently. "You've got beautiful hair. Same color as your father's." Ivy remained perfectly still, barely breathing. "My mother used to braid my hair," Eliza continued, keeping her voice low and steady. "Every morning before school, she'd tell me stories while she worked, made-up stories about princesses and dragons, and..." She trailed off, realizing Rowan was watching. "There, all done." The braids weren't perfect, but they were even and tight enough to last the day. "Thank you," Ivy whispered. The words were so quiet, Eliza almost missed them. "You're welcome." A door slammed somewhere in the cabin. Caleb, emerging from the room he apparently shared with his sister. He looked even surlier in the morning light, his hair sticking up at odd angles, his eyes still heavy with sleep. "Caleb, get the eggs," Rowan said. The boy grunted and headed outside without a word. "Is he always like this in the morning?" Eliza asked. "He's always like this, period." Rowan drained his coffee. "You'll get used to it." Would she? Eliza wasn't sure she'd be here long enough to get used to anything. Caleb returned with 4 eggs cradled in his shirt, each one carefully placed on the counter. He still didn't look at Eliza. "Set the table," Rowan told him. "Why can't she do it?" "Because I told you to do it." Caleb threw the utensils down with unnecessary force, making Ivy flinch. Rowan's jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything. Breakfast was oatmeal, fried eggs, and the leftover bread from yesterday. They ate in the same uncomfortable silence as last night's dinner. Eliza focused on her food, hyper-aware of every sound. The scrape of spoons, the creak of chairs, Caleb's deliberate loud chewing. "I'm heading to the mill," Rowan said when he'd finished. "Won't be back until dark. What should I—" Eliza caught herself. "What needs doing today?" He looked at her like he was trying to figure out if it was a real question. "Whatever you see that needs doing, laundry, mending, the chicken coop needs mucking out, but that's heavy work." "I can handle heavy work." "Caleb can do it after his lessons." "Lessons?" Caleb's head snapped up. "You're not skipping today just because we have a guest. Get your books out after I leave." "I don't need lessons. I need to—" "Books? Out. That's final." Rowan stood, reaching for his coat. He paused at the door, looking back at Eliza. "If you need anything from town, there's a list on the shelf. We go in on Saturdays." Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft thud. The silence he left behind was worse than the one during breakfast. Caleb shoved his chair back from the table. "I'm not doing lessons." "Your father said—" "I don't care what he said." The boy's eyes flashed. "You're not my mother. You can't tell me what to do." "You're right. I'm not your mother." Eliza kept her voice calm. "But your father gave you an instruction, and I'm here to make sure you follow it." How are you going to make me? It was a fair question. Eliza was maybe 5'4" and hadn't eaten properly in weeks. Caleb was nearly as tall as she was and fueled by rage. I'm not going to make you do anything, she said. But when your father comes home and asks if you did your lessons, I'm going to tell him the truth, and then you can explain to him why you didn't. Caleb's jaw worked. He wanted to argue, she could see it, but whatever his issues with Eliza were, they didn't seem to extend to outright defying his father. Fine, he spat, but I'm doing them in my room. That's fine. He stalked off, and moments later she heard the slam of a door. Ivy remained at the table, watching Eliza with those huge, solemn eyes. Well, Eliza said, more to herself than the child, that went better than expected. She cleared the breakfast dishes and washed them in the bucket of cold water. Then she surveyed the cabin properly for the first time in daylight. It was worse than she'd thought. Not dirty. Rowan clearly made some effort, but neglected. Dust in the corners, cobwebs in the rafters. The windows so clouded with grime she could barely see through them. Patches of the floor where the boards had never been properly finished, leaving splinters waiting to happen. And everywhere, the absence of a woman's touch. No curtains, no cushions, no plants or pictures or any of the small comforts that made a house a home. She rolled up her sleeves. Ivy, honey, do you know where your father keeps the cleaning rags? The little girl pointed to a drawer. Thank you. Can you show me? Ivy slipped off her chair and led Eliza to a drawer that held a collection of worn cloths, old shirts torn into squares mostly. Eliza selected a few and started with the table, scrubbing away the sticky residue of spilled food and years of accumulated grime. Ivy watched from a safe distance, the wooden horse never leaving her hand. You can help if you want, Eliza offered, or you can play. Either is fine. The girl seemed to consider this, then she slowly approached and picked up one of the smaller rags. Good, thank you. Eliza showed her how to wipe down the chairs, praising her when she managed to get a particularly stubborn spot. Ivy didn't smile, but something in her posture relaxed fractionally. They worked through the morning in companionable quiet. Eliza scrubbed the counters, the shelves, the windowsills. She swept the floor, uncovering the actual color of the wood beneath years of accumulated dirt. She found a ladder in the shed and took down the cobwebs, sending spiders scurrying for new hiding places. Around midday, Caleb emerged from his room, books in hand. I finished the arithmetic problems, he announced to no one in particular. Let me see. He thrust the slate at her reluctantly. Eliza examined his work. Long division, mostly correct except for two problems where he'd gotten careless with the remainders. These two are wrong, she said, pointing. No, they're not. Yes, they are. You forgot to say. You don't know anything about mathematics. I worked in a textile mill for 6 years, Eliza said evenly. I calculated piece rates and material costs every single day. I know arithmetic. Caleb snatched the slate back. I'm not redoing them. Then they'll be wrong when your father checks them. He doesn't check them. Well, I do. They stared at each other. Finally, Caleb looked away first. I'll fix them later, he muttered. Thank you. He disappeared back into his room, and Eliza heard the thud of something hitting a wall. Probably a book, possibly a boot. Ivy tugged on Eliza's skirt. What is it, honey? The little girl pointed to the window, the one Eliza had just cleaned. Outside, something red moved between the trees. What is that? A cardinal? Ivy nodded eagerly, then made a fluttering motion with her hands. You like birds? Another nod. Me too. My mother used to feed the sparrows outside our window. They'd wake us up every morning with their chirping. Eliza knelt down to Ivy's level. Maybe we could put out some seeds for the birds here. Would you like that? The smallest smile ghosted across Ivy's face before disappearing. It was something. By afternoon, Eliza's back ached and her hands were raw, but the cabin looked different. Not perfect, still rough, still sparse, but cleaner, brighter. The windows let in actual light now. She found bread flour and mixed up dough, kneading it on the counter while Ivy watched. The rhythmic work was soothing, familiar. She'd done this countless times in her mother's kitchen, back before everything fell apart. Have you ever made bread? Eliza asked. Ivy shook her head. Would you like to learn? A pause, then a tentative nod. Eliza showed her how to fold the dough, how to push it with the heels of her hands. Ivy's attempts were clumsy but earnest, flour dusting her nose and cheeks. She looked less like a ghost and more like a child. Just like that. You're doing wonderfully. They set the dough to rise near the warmth of the stove. While they waited, Eliza tackled the laundry, shirts and trousers that smelled of sawdust and sweat, Ivy's dresses that needed letting down, Caleb's things that he'd apparently been wearing until they could stand up on their own. She heated water and scrubbed each item against the washboard, her knuckles turning red from the cold and the harsh soap. Ivy helped hang things on the line Eliza had rigged near the fire, standing on a chair to reach. The work was endless, brutal, necessary. Exactly the kind of work Eliza had been doing her whole life. The difference was that here, in this cold cabin with these broken people, nobody was paying her piece rates. Nobody was timing her breaks or docking her wages for being 30 seconds late. She worked because it needed doing, because she'd agreed to do it, because the alternative was being thrown back to Red Hollow with nowhere to go. But also, and this surprised her, because it felt good to see the change, to watch the cabin transform from neglected to tended, to see Ivy's tentative smile when the bread came out of the oven, golden and perfect. When Rowan came home that evening, he stopped in the doorway. The cabin was warm. The windows gleamed. Fresh bread sat cooling on the counter. Ivy was setting the table without being asked, and even Caleb had emerged to do his evening chores without quite as much sullenness. "You did all this?" Rowan asked. "It needed doing," Eliza said simply. He walked through the room slowly, taking in the clean floor, the organized shelves, the way the whole space felt different. When he reached the bread, he broke off a piece and ate it without asking, eyes closing briefly. "When did you have time to make bread?" Between the laundry and the windows, Ivy helped. Rowan looked at his daughter. "Did she?" Ivy nodded, a flash of pride crossing her small face. "Well," he set his hat on the peg by the door. "I appreciate it." It wasn't effusive praise, but something in his voice made it feel like more. Dinner that night was venison stew again. Eliza had found the meat in the cold box and stretched it with extra vegetables and the dried beans. She'd made it go further, made it richer. The bread turned it into a real meal instead of just fuel. Caleb ate 3 pieces of bread without comment. That felt like progress. After the dishes were done and the children sent to bed, Eliza stood at the window looking out at the darkness. The temperature had dropped again, frost already forming on the glass. "You should get some rest," Rowan said behind her. "You worked hard today." "So did you." "I get paid for it." "So do I. Room and board, remember?" He moved to stand beside her. Both of them reflected dimly in the dark glass. "This is more than I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone to make sure the kids didn't burn the cabin down while I was gone. Maybe cook 1 meal a day." He gestured at the transformed room. "Not this." "I don't know how to do things halfway," Eliza admitted. "Never have." They stood in silence for a moment. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the eaves. "Caleb will come around," Rowan said finally. "He's angry, but he's not cruel. He just needs time." "And Ivy?" "Ivy needs someone who's patient with her, someone who doesn't push." He glanced at Eliza. "You were good with her today. She doesn't warm up to people easily." "She's a sweet child. They both are, under all the hurt. Their mother—" He stopped, started again. "Sarah was good with them. Patient, kind. I'm not those things. I try, but it's not the same. You're their father. You don't have to be their mother, too." "Someone has to be." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning neither of them wanted to examine too closely. "I should sleep," Eliza said abruptly. "Long day tomorrow." "Every day's long out here." She smiled despite herself. "Good night, Rowan." "Good night." In her small room, Eliza lay in the darkness and listened to the cabin settle around her. The creak of wood, the whisper of wind, the distant sound of Caleb coughing in the next room. She'd survived one day. That was something. The days that followed fell into a rhythm, each one bleeding into the next with the relentless sameness of frontier life. Wake before dawn. Coax the fire back to life. Make coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. Feed the children. Send Rowan off to the mill with something warm in his belly. Then the work. Always the work. Eliza mended clothes by the fire, while Ivy played quietly nearby. She taught Caleb mathematics when he allowed it, which was rarely. She learned to manage the temperamental pump, to keep the fire fed without wasting wood, to stretch meat and flour into meals that filled bellies, if not souls. Slowly, grudgingly, the cabin began to feel less hostile. Caleb still bristled at her presence, but he'd stopped openly defying her. He did his chores without being asked twice, finished his lessons with only moderate complaint. Once, she caught him eating a piece of the molasses cookies she'd made, though he pretended he hadn't when she looked at him directly. Ivy continued to trail after Eliza like a shadow, speaking in whispers when she spoke at all. But she smiled more. She'd started bringing Eliza small gifts, a smooth pebble from the yard, a feather she'd found, a drawing of the cabin done in careful charcoal. Rowan remained harder to read. He was polite, appreciative of the hot meals and clean clothes. He'd started talking to her in the evenings after the children were asleep, small conversations about nothing important. The weather, the price of lumber, whether the chickens were laying well. He never touched her, never stood too close, never gave any indication that he saw her as anything other than hired help. Which was fine. That's what she was. But sometimes Eliza caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite name. Not attraction, exactly. Something sadder. Like he was seeing a ghost of something he'd lost and didn't know whether to be grateful or angry about it. 2 weeks after her arrival, Eliza woke to find ice on the inside of her window. She dressed quickly, fingers clumsy with cold, and emerged to find Rowan already at the stove. "Coffee's ready," he said. "Thank you." They'd developed this routine. Whoever woke first made coffee. Usually it was Rowan, but on the mornings when Eliza beat him to it, he'd nod his thanks and drink it without complaint. "I need to go into town today," he said. "Saturday. We always go on Saturdays." "All right." "The children will want to come, Caleb especially. He sees his friends." "That's fine." Rowan hesitated, cup halfway to his mouth. "You should come too. Get out of the cabin. We can stop at the general store, pick up whatever you need." "I don't need anything. Everyone needs something." Eliza thought about Red Hollow, about the stairs, about Silas and his new fiancée, and all the people who'd witnessed her humiliation on that platform. "I'd rather stay here." "Eliza." "I said I'd rather stay here." Her voice came out sharper than intended. She softened it. "Please. I'm not ready." He studied her face, then nodded slowly. "All right. But eventually, you'll have to go back. Can't hide forever." "I'm not hiding." "Sure." The children were disappointed when they learned Eliza wasn't coming, though only Ivy showed it openly. Caleb pretended not to care, but Eliza noticed how he kept glancing at her while he got ready. "We'll be back by supper," Rowan said at the door. "Don't—" He stopped himself. "Don't what?" "Nothing. I was going to say don't work too hard, but I know you will anyway." After they left, the cabin felt enormous and empty. Eliza told herself she was relieved. A day alone meant she could work at her own pace, without Caleb's sulking or Ivy's constant presence. She could think without voices, move without eyes on her. She made it until noon before the silence became oppressive. She was mending one of Rowan's shirts. The cuff had torn and needed restitching when she heard the sound. Hoofbeats. Multiple horses. Eliza went to the window, peering out through the clean glass. 3 riders were approaching the cabin, moving with the casual confidence of men who owned wherever they went. Her stomach dropped. She didn't recognize the horses, didn't know the men, but she knew the type. Rich, entitled, looking for something. They pulled up in front of the cabin and dismounted. The leader, a man in his 40s with silver threading through his dark hair, handed his reins to one of the others and approached the door. Eliza stood frozen. Should she answer? Pretend no one was home? The knock came anyway, loud, demanding. She opened the door slowly, keeping her body in the gap so they couldn't see inside. "Help you?" she asked. The silver-haired man looked her up and down with eyes that lingered too long. "I'm looking for Rowan Vale. He's not here. When will he be back?" "I don't know." "Who are you?" Eliza hesitated. "I help with the children." "A nanny." The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "How modern of Vale. Tell him Samuel Hewitt came by. I want to talk to him about his land." "His land?" "This property. I'm interested in buying it." "Mr. Vale hasn't mentioned wanting to sell." "He will." Hewitt's smile widened. Everyone sells eventually. Tell him I'll make a generous offer. Very generous. He turned to leave, then paused. You're new to Red Hollow. It wasn't a question. I arrived a few weeks ago, Eliza said carefully. Ah, you're the mail-order bride Grady sent back. Hewitt's eyes gleamed with recognition and something uglier. I heard about that. Quite the spectacle. Heat flooded Eliza's face. Must have been humiliating, Hewitt continued, being rejected like that in front of the whole town. Still, you seem to have landed on your feet. Vale's a good man. Lonely, though. And you're living in his house, taking care of his children. He let the implication hang in the air. I'm his housekeeper. Of course you are. The way he said it made it sound obscene. Well, tell Vale I stopped by. I'll be seeing him around. The three men rode off, leaving Eliza standing in the doorway with shame burning through her chest. Everyone knew. Of course everyone knew. Small towns traded gossip like currency, and her story had all the elements of a good scandal. The rejected bride, the widower, the improper living arrangement. She closed the door and leaned against it, willing her hands to stop shaking. When Rowan returned with the children that evening, Eliza was calm again. She'd buried the shame, packed it away where it couldn't touch her. Someone came by, she said while they unloaded supplies. A man named Samuel Hewitt. Rowan's expression darkened. What did he want? He said he wants to buy your land. He can want all he likes. I'm not selling. He seemed confident you would. Hewitt's confident about a lot of things that aren't true. Rowan carried a sack of flour inside. He's been trying to buy up parcels around here for years, building some kind of empire. Most people have refused. He knew who I was, Eliza said quietly. About Silas. Rowan stopped. What did he say? Nothing that matters. Eliza, it doesn't matter. She met his eyes. I knew people would talk. It's fine. It's not fine. But it's reality. She took the flour from him and set it on the shelf. I can handle reality. That night, after the children were asleep, Rowan sat at the table longer than usual. Eliza worked at the counter, kneading dough for tomorrow's bread, aware of his eyes on her back. I'm sorry, he said finally. For what? For bringing you here. For putting you in a position where men like Hewitt think they can say whatever they want to you. Eliza turned. You didn't put me in that position. Silas did. You gave me a way out of a worse one. Still, it's not right. Very little is right out here. We work with what we have. Rowan stood and crossed to where she worked. He was close enough that she could smell sawdust and pine on his clothes. You're good at that, he said, watching her hands work the dough. At making bread? At accepting things? At just moving forward? What's the alternative? Crying about it? That doesn't change anything. Most people would cry anyway. I'm not most people, he almost smiled. No, you're not. Their eyes held for a moment too long. Eliza looked away first, focusing on the dough. Her heart was doing something strange in her chest, something she didn't want to examine. I should finish this, she said. Right. Rowan stepped back. I'll check the fire. He moved away, and Eliza let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. This was dangerous. All of it. The way Ivy had started calling her Miss Eliza in that soft voice. The way Caleb had stopped glaring quite so much. The way Rowan looked at her sometimes like she was solving a problem he'd forgotten could be solved. She was temporary. A solution until she saved enough to leave, or until Rowan decided he didn't need her anymore. Getting attached, letting any of them get attached, would only make the inevitable leaving hurt worse. But 3 weeks in the cabin had taught her something about herself. She was terrible at staying detached. Every meal she cooked, every shirt she mended, every moment she spent braiding Ivy's hair or helping Caleb with his arithmetic, she was weaving herself into this family. And the worst part was, she didn't entirely want to stop. The first real snow came in early March, transforming the world outside the cabin into something hostile and white. Eliza woke to find drifts pressed against the windows like frozen hands trying to get in. She dressed quickly, teeth chattering, and found Rowan already at the door, staring out at the wall of white blocking the entrance. How bad is it? She asked. Bad enough. I need to dig us out before I can even get to the woodpile. He pulled on his coat and gloves. Keep the fire going. This is going to take a while. She watched him shoulder through the door, snow cascading inside before he forced it shut again. Through the window, she could see him working, nothing but a dark shape against the endless white. The children woke to a world that had disappeared overnight. "Is Papa going to work?" Ivy asked, pressed against the glass. "Not today. The snow's too deep." Caleb appeared behind his sister, his expression unreadable. "How long will we be stuck here?" "I don't know." "Could be days," he said. "Last big snow, we were trapped for almost a week." Eliza's stomach tightened. A week in this small cabin with all of them, nowhere to go, nothing to do but survive each other's company. "Then we'd better make the best of it," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. By noon, Rowan had cleared a path to the woodshed and back, but the effort had exhausted him. He came inside coated in ice, his face red and raw from the wind. "Here." Eliza thrust a cup of hot coffee into his hands. "Sit down before you collapse." He didn't argue, just sank into the chair by the fire and let the heat work back into his bones. "Is it still coming down?" Eliza asked. "Hasn't stopped." "Won't for a while by the look of it." He took a long drink. "We've got enough wood for a few days if we're careful. Food might get tight toward the end." "We'll manage." "Always do." But he didn't sound convinced. The day stretched out strange and slow. With nowhere to go and nothing urgent to do, time seemed to thicken. Caleb prowled the cabin like a caged animal, opening drawers and closing them, picking up objects and setting them down. Ivy sat by the window, watching the snow fall with that peculiar stillness she had. By evening, the tension was suffocating. "I'm bored," Caleb announced to no one in particular. "Read a book," Rowan said without looking up from the harness he was mending. "I've read all my books 100 times. "Then read them 101 times. Caleb threw himself into a chair with theatrical despair. Eliza bit back a smile. For all his surliness, he was still very much a 10-year-old boy. "I could teach you a card game," she offered. "If you have cards." Caleb's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "What kind of game?" "Rummy. My mother taught me when I was about your age." "We don't have cards," Rowan said. "Yes, we do." Caleb jumped up and rummaged through a drawer, emerging with a battered deck. "Mama's cards. We haven't used them since—" He stopped abruptly. The air went tight again. Rowan's hand stilled on the harness. "We can use them. Your mother would have wanted them used." Caleb looked at his father for a long moment, some wordless communication passing between them. Then he brought the cards to the table. Eliza shuffled them, the familiar snap and flutter bringing back memories of the cramped apartment in Philadelphia, her mother's patient voice explaining the rules while winter wind rattled the windows. "All right," she said. "The goal is to make sets of 3 or 4 cards, either the same number or in sequence." She dealt the cards, and they played. At first, Caleb was sullen and distracted, making careless plays. But as the game progressed, his competitive nature kicked in. He started paying attention, studying his hand, thinking through his moves. "Can I play?" Ivy's small voice came from beside Eliza's chair. "Of course you can, honey. Here, sit on my lap and I'll help you." The little girl climbed up, settling against Eliza's chest with her head tucked under her chin. She was so light, so fragile. Eliza could feel the rapid flutter of her heartbeat through her thin dress. They played until full dark, the cabin lit only by firelight and the single lantern on the table. Caleb won 2 games, crowing with victory. Ivy won 1 with Eliza's help, her small smile worth more than any prize. Even Rowan seemed to relax, the hard lines around his mouth softening as he watched his children actually act like children for once. "Again," Ivy whispered when the 3rd game ended. "It's late," Rowan said. "Time for bed." "One more game," Caleb pleaded. "Please." Rowan looked at Eliza, and she saw the question in his eyes. She gave a tiny nod. "One more," he conceded. "Then bed. No arguments." They played the final game slowly, stretching it out. Nobody wanted it to end, this strange pocket of normalcy they'd stumbled into. But eventually, Caleb laid down his last card, winning again, and the spell broke. "Bed," Rowan said firmly. "Both of you." For once, they went without complaint. Ivy slid off Eliza's lap and padded to her room, turning at the doorway to give a small wave. Caleb gathered up the cards with exaggerated care, returning them to their drawer. "Can we play again tomorrow?" he asked. "If the snow's still bad, yes." "Good." He disappeared into the bedroom, leaving Rowan and Eliza alone by the dying fire. "Thank you," Rowan said after a while. "For what?" "For making them laugh. I haven't heard Caleb laugh like that in—" He trailed off, staring into the flames. "A long time. They're good kids. They just needed something to do. It's more than that." He looked at her directly. "You're good with them. Better than I am, most days. You're their father. You're exactly what they need. I'm a carpenter who doesn't know how to talk to his own children." The bitterness in his voice surprised her. "That's not true." "Isn't it? I work 12 hours a day and come home too tired to do anything but eat and sleep. I don't play games with them. I don't braid Ivy's hair or help Caleb with his lessons. I just exist around them." "You're surviving. That's not nothing. It's not enough." Eliza wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but she'd seen the way Ivy's face lit up when Rowan came through the door each night, the way Caleb straightened his shoulders, trying to look capable and grown. They needed him more than he realized, even if he couldn't see it. "You're doing the best you can," she said finally. "That's all anyone can do." He made a sound that might have been agreement or disagreement. Then he stood, adding another log to the fire. "We should sleep. Tomorrow might be worse." But tomorrow was better, or worse, depending on how you looked at it. The snow stopped sometime in the night, leaving behind 3 feet of pristine white, and a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Rowan spent the morning digging out further, creating paths to the barn and the chicken coop. Eliza rationed the food carefully, making oatmeal stretch for breakfast and planning a thin soup for dinner. By the third day, cabin fever had set in properly. Caleb picked fights over nothing. Ivy grew clingy, following Eliza so closely she nearly tripped over her. Even Rowan seemed on edge, his patience worn thin by confinement. Eliza was washing dishes when she heard raised voices from the children's room. "Give it back! It's mine! You can't just take my things!" A crash, something breaking. Eliza dried her hands and went to investigate. The children's room was chaos, clothes strewn everywhere, books scattered across the floor. Caleb stood in the center holding a small wooden box, his face red with anger. Ivy huddled in the corner, tears streaming down her face. "What happened?" Eliza demanded. "She went through my things," Caleb shouted. "She had no right." "I just wanted to see," Ivy whispered, barely audible. "These are private. Mama gave them to me." Eliza crossed to Caleb and held out her hand. "Let me see." "No." "Caleb, let me see." Reluctantly, he handed over the box. Inside were treasures, a lock of hair tied with ribbon, a small photograph, a carved wooden bird, some coins, a letter in careful handwriting. "These were your mother's?" Eliza asked gently. He nodded, not trusting his voice. "And Ivy was looking at them?" "She broke Mama's bird." He pointed to the floor where the wooden carving lay in 2 pieces. Eliza picked up the pieces. The break was clean, easily fixed with some glue and patience. But to a 10-year-old boy holding on to every scrap of his dead mother, it might as well have been shattered beyond repair. "I can fix this," she said. "No, you can't. It's ruined." "Caleb, I can fix it. I promise." "How would you know? You're not a carpenter." "No, but I've repaired plenty of broken things in my life." She held the pieces carefully. "I'll need some wood glue. Does your father have some?" Caleb's anger deflated slightly, replaced by uncertainty. "In his workshop." "All right, I'll fix it today, and you'll have it back by tonight, I promise." "What about her?" He gestured at Ivy, who was now crying silently, her whole body shaking. Eliza looked at the little girl, seeing the devastation on her face. "Ivy, come here." The child shook her head, pressing herself further into the corner. "Ivy, honey, I'm not angry with you. Come here." Slowly, painfully, Ivy uncurled and crossed to where Eliza knelt. Her face was splotchy with tears, her nose running. "Did you break it on purpose?" Eliza asked softly. Ivy shook her head violently. "I didn't think so. Accidents happen. But you shouldn't have taken something that belonged to your brother without asking. That wasn't right." "I'm sorry," Ivy whispered, the words barely audible. Then louder, turning to Caleb, "I'm sorry." Caleb looked at his sister, his anger warring with something else. Love, probably, buried under all the grief and resentment. "Just don't touch my stuff again." "I won't. I promise." The tension broke like a fever. Caleb sank onto his bed, suddenly looking exhausted. Ivy wiped her nose on her sleeve, hiccuping. "All right," Eliza said, standing. "Clean this room up, both of you. And Caleb, I'll have your bird fixed by supper." She left them to it and went to find the wood glue. Rowan's workshop was attached to the barn, a small space that smelled of sawdust and pine. Tools hung neatly on the walls, saws, planes, chisels, all well maintained. A half-finished chair sat on the workbench, its joints carefully fitted. Eliza found the glue and brought the broken bird to the window where the light was better. The carving was beautiful, clearly made by skilled hands. She fitted the pieces together, applied glue to the break, and held them firmly, waiting for the bond to set. The door opened behind her. "Find what you needed?" Rowan asked. "Yes." "The children had a fight. Ivy broke this." He came closer, examining the bird. "That was Sarah's. I made it for her years ago before we were even married." His voice was distant, remembering. "She carried it in her pocket everywhere. Said it reminded her of me when I was away." "It's beautiful work." "I was better at carving then, had more time." He touched the bird gently. "Caleb took it hard when she died, kept everything of hers he could find. I should have talked to him about it, but I didn't know what to say." "He's angry. He's got a right to be." "Maybe, but he's taking it out on everyone around him. Like I said, he's his father's son." Rowan's mouth twisted bitterly. "I'm not good at this, Eliza, any of it. I know how to build things, how to work wood. But people? My own children? I'm lost." Eliza kept holding the bird, feeling the glue set under her fingers. "You're not lost. You're grieving. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes. Lost means you don't know where you are. Grieving means you know exactly where you are. You just don't know how to move forward from there." He was quiet for a long moment. "How'd you get so wise?" "I'm not wise. I've just had practice being alone." "You're not alone now." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning neither of them wanted to acknowledge. Eliza focused on the bird, testing the joint. It held firm. "It's fixed," she said, changing the subject deliberately. "Good as new." "Nothing's ever good as new once it's been broken." "No. But it can still be whole." She handed him the bird and left the workshop before he could respond, before the conversation could turn into something she wasn't ready for. That night at supper, she returned the bird to Caleb. He took it carefully, examining the repair with a critical eye. "You can't even see the break," he said, surprised. "I told you I could fix it." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for the first time since she'd arrived, there wasn't hostility in his eyes. Just a cautious, tentative something that might eventually become trust. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You're welcome." The snow finally melted enough on the 5th day for Rowan to make it back to the mill. The cabin felt enormous after he left, echoing with absence. Eliza threw herself into work. Anything to keep busy. She scrubbed floors that didn't need scrubbing, reorganized shelves that were already organized. The children sensed her restlessness and gave her space, playing quietly in their room. She was elbow-deep in laundry when someone knocked on the door. Her first thought was that Rowan had forgotten something, but when she opened it, 3 women stood on the porch, all dressed in expensive coats and elaborate hats, looking at her cabin and her work-roughened hands with barely concealed disdain. "Can I help you?" Eliza asked. The woman in front, older, with steel-gray hair and a face that had probably been beautiful once, smiled with all the warmth of a snake. "You must be Miss Mercer. I'm Margaret Hale." The name hit Eliza like a slap. Margaret Hale, Silas's fiancée, the woman he'd chosen instead. "Mrs. Hale," Eliza managed, proud that her voice stayed steady. "Actually, it's Miss Hale. I'm not married. Yet." The smile widened. "Though that will change soon. Silas and I are planning a spring wedding." "Congratulations." "Thank you. We're very happy." Margaret's eyes raked over Eliza's worn dress, her loose hair, the flour smudges on her apron. "I wanted to come by and see how you were settling in. The whole town's been talking about your arrangement with Mr. Vale." "Have they?" "Oh yes. It's quite the topic of conversation. A woman living alone with a widower and his children. No chaperone, no propriety." She said it sweetly, like she was commenting on the weather. Some people have concerns. What kind of concerns? Eliza kept her voice flat, refusing to give this woman the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. About the children, primarily. A young woman in their home, no family connection, no formal employment arrangement. It raises questions about what exactly your role is in that household. One of the other women tittered behind her gloved hand. Eliza's hands curled into fists at her sides. I help with the children and the housework. That's all. Of course. I'm sure that's all it is. Margaret's tone made it clear she believed nothing of the sort. But appearances matter, Miss Mercer, especially in a respectable community like Red Hollow. I wasn't aware Red Hollow was particularly respectable. The words came out before Eliza could stop them. Margaret's smile froze. Excuse me? Well, it's a frontier town full of gamblers, miners, and men who drink themselves unconscious every Saturday night. Forgive me if I'm not overly concerned with propriety. Margaret's face went tight with anger. You would do well to watch your tongue. The people of this town have standards. The people of this town watched a man humiliate me on a train platform and did nothing. So forgive me if I don't particularly care what they think of my living arrangements. How dare you? Is there anything else? Eliza interrupted. Because I have work to do. Margaret drew herself up to her full height. You've made a mistake coming here. These people won't tolerate a woman of your sort. My sort. A woman with no family, no reputation, no prospects, living off the charity of a lonely widower. She leaned forward slightly. Silas told me about you, about how desperate you were, how you begged him to reconsider. That's a lie. Is it? Because the way I heard it, you threw yourself at him right there on the platform, made quite a scene. Eliza's vision tunneled. Get off this property. We're just trying to help you understand, but get off this property. The steel in her voice made all three women step back. Margaret recovered first, her smile returning with added venom. We'll go, but this isn't over. The town council will be hearing about this situation, for the children's sake, if nothing else. They left in a rustle of expensive fabric and manufactured outrage, their voices carrying across the snow as they climbed into their carriage. Eliza stood in the doorway, shaking with rage and something that felt horribly like shame. Behind her, she heard small footsteps. Miss Eliza? She turned to find Ivy standing there, eyes wide with concern. It's all right, honey. They're gone. Why were they mean to you? Because some people are just mean. It doesn't matter. But it did matter. Of course it did. Eliza closed the door and leaned against it, fighting the urge to cry or scream or both. She'd known the town talked. She'd known her position here was precarious. But having it thrown in her face, having Silas's lies spread by his smug fiancé, having her desperation used as ammunition. They're wrong, Caleb said from the doorway of his room. Eliza looked up, surprised. The boy stood there with his arms crossed, his jaw set in a way that reminded her painfully of Rowan. Caleb, they're wrong, he repeated. You don't. He struggled for words. You help us. You take care of us. That's not shameful. Your brother's right, Ivy added softly. Something cracked in Eliza's chest. These children, who she'd been so careful not to let herself love, were defending her. To themselves, to each other, maybe to the world. Thank you, she managed. Both of you. When Rowan came home that evening, Eliza told him about the visit. She kept her voice steady, clinical, reciting the facts without the emotion roiling underneath. He listened without interrupting, his face growing darker with each sentence. Margaret Hale came here, he said when she finished. With 2 other women. I didn't catch their names. And she threatened to go to the town council? She implied they had concerns about the children. Rowan's jaw clenched so hard she could hear his teeth grind. That's horseshit. The council has no say in how I run my household. She's engaged to Silas. She's connected to people in town. I don't care if she's connected to the president himself. He stood abruptly, pacing. She had no right to come here. No right to speak to you that way. Rowan, it's fine. It's not fine. The words came out louder than he intended. The children playing near the fire went still. He took a breath, lowering his voice. It's not fine. None of this is fine. Then what do you want to do about it? He stopped pacing, looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. I don't know, but I'll figure something out. That night, Eliza lay in her narrow bed and stared at the ceiling, Margaret's words echoing in her head. A woman of your sort. Living off charity, no reputation, no prospects. All of it true, if you looked at it the right way. She was exactly what Margaret had said. A woman with nothing, surviving on the kindness of a man she barely knew. But she'd also scrubbed this cabin clean, mended clothes until her fingers bled, taught Caleb mathematics and baked bread with ivy, and fixed a broken wooden bird. She'd earned her place here, bought it with sweat and work, and caring about people who weren't hers to care about. That had to count for something, didn't it? The next Saturday, Rowan came home from town with his jaw set and his eyes hard. "Get your coat," he said to Eliza without preamble. She looked up from the stove where she was stirring soup. "What?" "Your coat. We're going to town." "Rowan, I told you that—" "I know what you told me, but this has gone on long enough." He was already reaching for his hat. "The whole town thinks they can talk about you like you're some kind of scandal. Time to change that." Eliza's stomach dropped. "What are you planning?" "Nothing dramatic. We're just going to the general store like normal people. You need supplies, and I'm tired of you hiding out here like you've done something wrong." "I'm not hiding." "Yes, you are. And I understand why, but it's making things worse. Every day you don't show your face in town, you're confirming what they think, that you're ashamed, that there's something improper going on here." He was right. Eliza hated that he was right. "Fine," she said, untying her apron with more force than necessary. "But if this goes badly, it won't." "You can't know that." "No, but I can stand next to you when it doesn't." He looked at her directly. "You're not alone in this, Eliza. Stop acting like you are." The children wanted to come, but Rowan told them to stay home. Caleb protested until Rowan gave him a look that could strip bark off a tree. They left with Ivy waving from the window, looking small and worried. The ride to Red Hollow felt longer than it actually was. Eliza sat rigid on the wagon seat, her hands clenched in her lap. Every rut in the road jolted through her, but she barely noticed. "Breathe," Rowan said. "I am breathing." "You're holding your breath. I can see your shoulders up around your ears." She forced herself to exhale. "What if they're all there? Margaret and Silas, and then they're there. Doesn't change what we're doing." "Which is what, exactly?" "Buying flour and sugar like civilized people." Despite everything, Eliza almost smiled. "That's your grand plan? Shopping?" "Sometimes the best way to fight talk is to act like there's nothing to talk about." They pulled into town just after noon. The main street was busy. Saturday always brought people in from the surrounding homesteads. Eliza recognized a few faces from that first day, the ones who'd watched Silas reject her on the platform. Rowan helped her down from the wagon, his hand steady on her elbow. They walked toward the general store side by side, and Eliza felt every eye track their movement. The store was warm and crowded, smelling of coffee and leather and the sweet spice scent of bulk goods. Conversations died as they entered. Mr. Patterson, the store owner, looked up from behind the counter. "Rowan, Miss Mercer." "Patterson," Rowan nodded. "We need flour, sugar, coffee if you've got it. Some fabric too. Miss Mercer needs to let out the children's clothes. They're growing like weeds." It was such a mundane request, so aggressively normal, that some of the tension in the room eased. Mr. Patterson pulled out his ledger. "I've got everything but the fabric. Mrs. Chen at the millinery has better selection for that." He paused. "How are the young ones doing?" "Better." Rowan glanced at Eliza. "They've got someone looking after them properly now." "I heard about that." Patterson's expression was neutral, giving nothing away. "Must be a help." "It is." While Patterson gathered their order, Eliza pretended to examine the goods on the shelves. Behind her, she heard whispers, not quite loud enough to make out words, but the tone was clear. Speculation. Judgment. "Eliza." She turned. Rowan stood at the counter with several bolts of fabric. "Which one do you think Ivy would like?" It was a simple question, but Eliza understood what he was doing, making it clear she wasn't just hired help. She was part of decisions about his children. She crossed to examine the fabric. "The blue. It matches her eyes." "Blue it is." Rowan turned to Patterson. 2 yards of the blue, and maybe a yard of that brown for Caleb. He ripped his good pants last week." Patterson cut the fabric while other customers watched. An older woman near the door whispered something to her companion, who laughed behind her hand. Rowan's shoulders tightened, but his voice stayed even. "That everything?" Unless you need anything else, Patterson tallied the numbers. Comes to $4.60. Rowan paid, and they were gathering their packages when the door opened. Silas Grady walked in. He stopped when he saw them, his expression flickering through surprise, discomfort, and something that might have been anger. Behind him came Margaret Hale, resplendent in a green dress that probably cost more than Eliza had earned in a year at the mill. The store went completely silent. "Rowan," Silas said after a painful pause. "Grady, I didn't expect to see you in town today." "I come to town every Saturday, you know that." Silas's eyes slid to Eliza, then quickly away. "Of course." Margaret had no such compunction. She looked directly at Eliza with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Miss Mercer, how lovely to see you again. I do hope you took my advice to heart." "Your advice?" Eliza repeated flatly. "About propriety. I'd hate for there to be any unpleasantness with the town council." Rowan set down the packages he was holding with careful precision. "There won't be any unpleasantness with the town council because the town council has no authority over how I run my household." "But they do have authority over moral standards in the community," Margaret said sweetly, "especially when children are involved." "My children are fine. Are they? Living in a house with an unmarried woman of questionable—" "Watch yourself." Rowan's voice dropped to something dangerous. "Watch yourself very carefully, Miss Hale." Silas stepped forward, hand raised in a placating gesture. "Now, Rowan, there's no need for hostility. Margaret's just concerned—" "About what? About my kids? Because I don't recall either of you ever giving a damn about them before." "That's not fair." "Fair?" Rowan's laugh was harsh. "You want to talk about fair? How about we talk about how you brought a woman all the way from Philadelphia with promises, then left her stranded with nowhere to go? You want to talk about fair, Grady, or you want to keep your mouth shut?" Silas's face went red. "I had every right to change my mind. The arrangement was contingent on mutual satisfaction." "Yeah, we all heard your little speech on the platform." Rowan picked up his packages again. "Real brave, humiliating a woman in front of the whole town. Must have made you feel like a big man." "I don't have to stand here and listen to this." "Then don't. Door's right there." Silas looked at Margaret, who had gone rigid with fury. "We should go." "No." Margaret's voice cut through the room. "I'm not going anywhere until someone addresses the fact that this woman is living in sin with—" "Finish that sentence," Rowan said quietly, "and I'll finish this conversation outside." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm telling you to mind your business before you say something you can't take back." The air crackled with tension. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat nervously. "Maybe everyone should just—" "Miss Mercer!" a new voice rang out. Everyone turned. A woman stood near the back of the store, middle-aged, plainly dressed, with kind eyes and work-roughened hands. Eliza didn't recognize her. "I'm Anna Morris," the woman said, coming forward. "I live about 5 miles north of the Vale place. I wanted to thank you." Eliza blinked. "Thank me? My daughter Clara visited your cabin last week. She's friends with the Miller girl. They were sledding nearby and stopped in for water. Clara said you were so kind to her, gave her fresh bread and sent her home with extra for her brothers." Anna smiled. She hasn't stopped talking about the nice lady at the Vale cabin. "Oh, it was nothing." "It wasn't nothing to her, or to me." Anna glanced at Margaret. "Whatever people want to say about you, Miss Mercer, my daughter says you're good people. That's enough for me." Margaret's mouth opened, then closed. She looked around the store, perhaps expecting support, but found only carefully neutral faces. "Thank you, Mrs. Morris," Eliza managed, her throat tight. Anna nodded and returned to her shopping. The spell was broken. Conversations resumed, carefully avoiding the confrontation, but no longer feeding it either. Margaret grabbed Silas's arm. "We're leaving." "Margaret, now, Silas." They left in a swirl of expensive fabric and wounded pride. The door slammed behind them hard enough to rattle the glass. Rowan let out a long breath. "Well, that could have gone worse." "Could it have?" Eliza was shaking, adrenaline making her hands unsteady. They could have actually gotten the town council involved. This was just bluster. He picked up the last of their packages. "Come on, let's go home." They were loading the wagon when Anna Morris approached again, this time with a basket. "Miss Mercer, I wonder if you'd accept these." She held out the basket. Eggs for my chickens. I always have more than we can use. I couldn't. Please. I insist. Anna's eyes were warm. And if you ever need anything at all, you come find me. We women need to look out for each other, especially out here where people are so quick to judge. Eliza took the basket, not trusting her voice. Anna patted her hand and walked away. On the ride home, neither of them spoke for a long time. Eliza held the basket of eggs in her lap, still processing what had happened. The confrontation, the defense, the unexpected kindness. Thank you, she said finally. For what? For standing up for me. You didn't have to do that. Rowan kept his eyes on the road. Yeah, I did. Why? Because you work yourself to the bone taking care of my kids and my house. Because you've never asked for anything you haven't earned. Because... He stopped, jaw working. Because it was the right thing to do. Margaret meant what she said about the town council. Let her try. Half the council members owe me favors. The other half are too practical to care about gossip. You can't know that for sure. No. He glanced at her. But I do know that what we're doing, what you're doing, isn't wrong, and I'm not going to let people make you feel like it is. Something warm bloomed in Eliza's chest, dangerous and unwanted. She forced it down. When they got back to the cabin, the children rushed out to greet them. Ivy launched herself at Eliza's legs, and even Caleb smiled when he saw the fabric. Is that for us? He asked. The blue's for your sister, the brown's for you. New pants to replace the ones you destroyed. I didn't destroy them. They just developed a structural weakness. Rowan snorted. That what we're calling it now? They unloaded the wagon together, all four of them, passing packages and laughing when Caleb nearly dropped the flour. Inside, Eliza unpacked while Rowan built up the fire. The children hovered, chattering about what had happened while they were gone. Caleb had finished his arithmetic. Ivy had drawn a picture of a bird. It felt normal, domestic, like they were a family. The thought terrified her. That night, after the children were asleep, Eliza sat by the fire mending one of Rowan's shirts. He was at the table working on paperwork, mill records by the look of it. Can I ask you something? She said. Always. Why did you really help me that day on the platform? His pen stilled. I told you, what Grady did was wrong. Lots of things are wrong. Doesn't mean people intervene. He set down the pen and looked at her. You want the real answer? Yes. Because I recognized the look on your face, the one that said you were drowning, but too proud to ask for help. He paused. I had that same look for months after Sarah died. Nobody helped me either. They just watched and whispered and eventually stopped asking how I was doing. I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me something. Taught me that when you see someone drowning, you throw them a rope. You don't wait for them to ask for it. Eliza looked down at the shirt in her hands, blinking back sudden tears. You saved my life, you know. Not figuratively, literally. I had nowhere to go, no money. It was February. I would have frozen to death in some alley, or worse. You wouldn't have. You're too stubborn to die in an alley. That's not funny. Wasn't meant to be. He stood and crossed to where she sat. Eliza, look at me. She did. He was standing close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, the small scar above his left eyebrow. You don't owe me gratitude, he said. You've paid for your place here 10 times over. The only reason my kids are eating decent meals and wearing clean clothes and learning to laugh again is you. It's not just anything. It matters. His voice softened. You matter. The air between them felt charged, heavy with things neither of them could say. Eliza's heart hammered against her ribs. Then Ivy cried out in her sleep, a small, frightened sound, and the moment shattered. Rowan stepped back. I should check on her. I'll go. Eliza was already standing, grateful for the excuse to move. You finish your paperwork. Ivy had kicked off her blankets and was tangled in her nightgown, making small, distressed noises. Eliza sat on the edge of the bed and gently straightened the fabric, pulling the blankets back up. Shh, honey, you're all right. Just a dream. Ivy's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and scared. Mama? The word punched Eliza in the chest. No, sweetheart, it's me. It's Eliza. Where's Mama? Your Mama's... Eliza's throat closed. She couldn't say it, couldn't tell this half-asleep child that her mother was gone. Your mama loves you very much, but I'm here now. I'm right here. Ivy seemed to accept this, snuggling into the blankets. Don't leave. I won't leave. I promise. Promise? I promise. Ivy's breathing evened out, slipping back into deeper sleep. Eliza sat there for a long moment, hand resting on the little girl's shoulder, feeling the weight of the promise she'd just made. Don't leave. But how could she promise that? She had no claim to this family, no right to make promises about the future. She was temporary, a stopgap, a solution to an immediate problem. Except it didn't feel temporary anymore. She found Rowan still at the table when she emerged. He looked up, question in his eyes. Nightmare, Eliza said. She's fine now. She gets them sometimes. Ever since... He didn't finish. Didn't need to. Eliza sat down across from him. She called me Mama. Rowan went very still. What did you say? I told her I was here, that I wouldn't leave. She met his eyes. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't make promises I can't keep. Who says you can't keep it? Rowan. I mean it. He leaned forward. You think I haven't noticed? How good you are with them. How much they need you. How much I... He stopped himself. How much you what? He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking exhausted. This wasn't supposed to happen. You were supposed to be here temporarily, just until you got on your feet. That was the arrangement. I know, but it's been 2 months, and I can't imagine this house without you anymore. Can't imagine coming home to it cold and empty, the kids half feral, everything falling apart. He laughed, but it sounded pained. You fixed us, Eliza. Fixed things I didn't even know were broken. I haven't fixed anything. You made bread with my daughter. You taught my son mathematics. You cleaned windows and mended clothes and made this place feel like a home again. His voice roughened. Sarah's been gone 2 years, and this is the first time it's felt like we're living instead of just surviving. Eliza didn't know what to say to that. Couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. I'm not asking for anything, Rowan continued. I know this is complicated. I know the whole town's watching. I know you have every reason to leave as soon as you can afford to. He met her eyes. But if you wanted to stay, really stay, there'd be a place for you here. As what? Your housekeeper? As whatever you want to be. The words hung between them, weighted with possibility and danger. Before Eliza could respond, hoofbeats sounded outside. Multiple riders, moving fast. Rowan stood immediately, crossing to the window. Stay here. Who is it? Don't know. But nobody rides up to a house that fast with good intentions. He grabbed the rifle from above the door and stepped outside. Eliza followed despite his instructions, staying in the doorway where she could see. 3 men sat on horseback in the yard. The one in front was Samuel Hewitt, the man who'd come by before. The other 2 looked like hired muscle, rough men with guns visible on their hips. Evening, Vale, Hewitt said pleasantly, as if showing up armed after dark was perfectly normal. Hewitt, what do you want? Just thought I'd check if you'd reconsidered my offer. On the land. I told you, I'm not selling. That's unfortunate, because I've been doing some research, and it turns out you owe quite a bit to the bank. $300, if I'm not mistaken, due at the end of next month. Rowan's grip on the rifle tightened. That's none of your concern. It becomes my concern when I own the note. Hewitt smiled. Bought it from the bank yesterday. Perfectly legal. So now you owe me $300, Vale, and I'm calling in the debt. You can't do that. The terms say the note holder can demand payment at any time. I'm the note holder. I'm demanding payment. He leaned forward in his saddle. So you have a choice. Sell me this land for a fair price or lose it when you can't pay. Either way, I get what I want. You son of a... Now, no need for that kind of language, especially in front of the lady. Hewitt's eyes slid to Eliza. Unless she's not that kind of lady. Rowan raised the rifle. Get off my property. I'm going. But think about my offer, Vale. $300 is a lot of money. More than a carpenter makes in 6 months. He turned his horse. You've got until the end of April. After that, the bank, well, I will foreclose. And you and your little family will be out on the street. They rode off into the darkness, leaving Rowan standing in the yard with murder in his eyes. Eliza stepped out. Rowan, Not now. His voice was tight, controlled, too controlled. What are you going to do? I don't know. He lowered the rifle, shoulders sagging. I don't have $300. I've got maybe 80 saved. The rest was supposed to come from selling timber this spring, but he broke off, jaw working. There has to be something. There isn't. I've already mortgaged everything I can mortgage, taken every extra shift at the mill. There's nothing left to squeeze. Then we'll figure something out. He looked at her. We? Yes, we. You think I'm going to stand by and watch them take your home? Your children's home? Something fierce and grateful flashed across his face. This isn't your fight, Eliza. Yes, she said quietly. It is. Because somewhere between the frozen platform and the card games by firelight, between mending his shirts and braiding his daughter's hair, between the confrontation at the general store and the promises made in the dark, somewhere in all of that, his fight had become hers. Whether she was ready for it or not. They sat at the kitchen table until well past midnight, papers spread between them like evidence of a crime. Numbers that didn't add up no matter how many times Rowan tallied them. Bills, debts, the mortgage note with Samuel Hewitt's name freshly inked at the bottom. There has to be something we're missing, Eliza said, scanning the figures again. There isn't. Rowan's voice was flat, defeated in a way she'd never heard before. I've been over it 100 times. Even if I sell every stick of furniture, every tool I own, it won't come close to $300. What about the mill? Could they advance your wages? I already asked for an advance last year when Caleb got sick. They were clear there wouldn't be another one. Eliza's mind raced through possibilities, each one crashing against the brutal reality of their situation. I have some money saved. Not much, but no. Rowan's hand covered hers on the table, the contact startling them both. He pulled back. I'm not taking money you've earned. That's yours for when you... He stopped. For when I what? For when you leave. You'll need it to start over somewhere. The assumption stung more than it should have. I told you this is my fight too. Eliza's? What if we went to the town council, explained what Hewitt's doing? It can't be legal, buying someone's debt just to force them off their land. It's completely legal. Unethical as hell, but legal. He rubbed his face. And the council won't help. Half of them are in Hewitt's pocket already. They fell silent. The fire crackled in the hearth. Outside, wind rattled the windows. Then we do what he wants, Eliza said quietly. We sell him the land. And go where? With what money? By the time I pay off the note, there'll be nothing left. I'll have 2 kids and no way to feed them. You'll have your skills. You're a good carpenter. Skills don't matter without tools or materials, and those cost money I won't have. His laugh was bitter. Sarah and I bought this land with everything we had, built this cabin ourselves. It was supposed to be our future, our children's future. He looked around the room. Now it's just another thing I failed to hold on to. You haven't failed, haven't I? My wife is dead. My kids barely speak. I'm about to lose the only home they've ever known. That sounds like failure to me. Eliza reached across the table and grabbed his wrist, forcing him to look at her. Stop. Just stop. Your wife died of a fever you couldn't prevent. Your children are traumatized, but they're healing. I see it every day. And this land situation isn't your fault. Hewitt engineered this. Doesn't change the outcome. Maybe not. But giving up sure as hell won't either. They stared at each other, her hand still on his wrist, both of them breathing hard like they'd been running. What do you suggest? He asked finally. I don't know yet, but I know giving up isn't it. The next morning, Eliza woke with an idea that was either brilliant or insane. Probably insane, but desperation made you consider things you'd normally dismiss. She waited until Rowan left for the mill, until the children were occupied with their lessons. Then she put on her best dress, the green wool she'd worn on the train, and pinned up her hair with extra care. I need to go to town, she told Caleb. Can you watch your sister for a few hours? He looked up from his arithmetic, suspicious. Why? I have some business to attend to. What kind of business? The kind that's none of yours. Can you watch her or not? Caleb glanced at Ivy, who was drawing at the table. Fine, but if Papa asks, I'll tell him myself. Eliza pulled on her coat. There's bread and cheese for lunch. Don't let the fire go out. The walk to town took over an hour. By the time Eliza reached Red Hollow's main street, her feet ached and her resolve was wavering. What she was about to do went against every instinct of pride and self-preservation she had. But sometimes survival meant swallowing your pride and doing what needed to be done. The bank was a solid brick building at the end of the street, newer and more substantial than most of Red Hollow's structures. Eliza pushed through the heavy door, chin up, trying to look like she belonged there. A clerk looked up from his desk. "Can I help you, miss?" "I'd like to speak with Mr. Winters, the bank manager." "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but it's urgent. It's about the Vale mortgage." The clerk's eyebrows rose. "I see. Wait here." He disappeared through a door marked private. Eliza waited, acutely aware of the other customers watching her. A woman living alone with a widower coming to the bank to discuss his debts. The gossip would be all over town by nightfall. Let them talk. She'd stopped caring what Red Hollow thought weeks ago. The clerk returned. "Mr. Winters will see you." The office was oak-paneled and warm, dominated by a massive desk. Behind it sat a portly man in his 50s, spectacles perched on his nose. "Miss Mercer, is it?" He didn't rise or offer his hand. "My clerk says you're here about the Vale mortgage." "That's right. I'm afraid I can't discuss the details of Mr. Vale's financial affairs with a third party. I'm not asking you to discuss them. I'm here to make a payment." That got his attention. "A payment?" "Yes." Eliza pulled the small cloth pouch from her pocket and set it on the desk. Inside was every dollar she'd saved from her time at the mill, every penny she'd brought west with her. $43. "I want to put this toward the note." Winters opened the pouch and counted the money with practiced efficiency. $43. That still leaves $257. "I know, but it's a start. Miss Mercer, with all due respect, Mr. Hewitt owns that note now. I'm not sure he'd accept partial payments." "He doesn't have a choice, does he? The law says you have to accept payments on a debt." Winters sat back, studying her over his spectacles. "You're surprisingly well informed. I worked in a textile mill for 6 years. I know how debts and wages work." She leaned forward. "Take the payment, Mr. Winters, put it toward the principal. Do it properly, with documentation, so there's a legal record." "May I ask why you're doing this? It's quite unusual for a woman to pay another man's debts, unless—" He let the implication hang. Heat flooded Eliza's face. "Unless what? Unless I'm his mistress? His whore?" She stood, palms flat on the desk. "I'm his housekeeper, Mr. Winters. I take care of his children and his home in exchange for room and board. And I'm paying this debt because he gave me shelter when I had nowhere else to go, because his children deserve to keep their home, because it's the right thing to do." Winters had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I meant no offense." "Yes, you did. Everyone in this town does. You all look at me and see something shameful because you can't imagine a woman and a man living under the same roof without sin involved." Her voice shook with fury she'd been holding back for weeks. "But you know what? I don't care what you think. Take the money or don't. If you don't, I'll find another way to help him, because that family matters more to me than your judgment or your gossip or your narrow little minds." She was breathing hard, hands trembling. The office was silent except for the ticking of the wall clock. Then Winters cleared his throat. "I'll process the payment, and I'll make sure Mr. Hewitt receives proper documentation." "Thank you." "But Miss Mercer, this only buys you a little time. Unless Mr. Vale can come up with the remaining $257 by the end of April, Hewitt will still foreclose." "I know, but a little time is better than none." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "And Mr. Winters? Whatever you think of me, I sleep just fine at night. Can you say the same?" She didn't wait for an answer. The walk back to the cabin gave her time to regret everything. What had she done? Given away every cent she had, chained herself even more firmly to a situation that couldn't last. When this inevitably fell apart, she'd have nothing. No savings, no escape route, no way out. But the image of Ivy's face, of Caleb's tentative trust, of Rowan's exhausted gratitude, those were worth more than $43, weren't they? She got back to find the cabin in chaos. Smoke poured from the open door. Caleb stood in the yard coughing, Ivy crying in his arms. "What happened?" Eliza ran to them. "The stew boiled over," Caleb gasped. "It got all over the stove and started smoking, and I tried to clean it, but—" "It's all right. You're all right. That's what matters. She took Ivy from him. Stay out here. I'll handle it. Inside, the smoke was thick but not dangerous. The pot had indeed boiled over, creating a mess on the stovetop. Eliza moved it to the counter, opened windows to air out the cabin, and scrubbed the stove clean. By the time Rowan came home that evening, the crisis was over. But Caleb confessed immediately, clearly expecting punishment. I'm sorry, Papa. I was watching it, I swear, but I was helping Ivy with her drawing and I forgot. Is anyone hurt? Rowan asked. No, sir. Is the cabin burned down? No, sir. Then we're fine. He ruffled Caleb's hair. Accidents happen. Just be more careful next time. Caleb looked stunned by this mild response. Eliza suspected the old Rowan, the grief-broken one from before she arrived, would have reacted differently. At dinner, Rowan was quieter than usual. He kept glancing at Eliza with an odd expression. What? She asked finally. Winters at the bank sent a boy by the mill today, said to tell me someone made a payment on my note. His eyes were steady on hers. Said it was $43. That's an oddly specific amount. Eliza's stomach dropped. Rowan? That's exactly how much you'd have saved by now, working here for 2 months at room and board. It was my money to do with as I pleased. That was your money to leave with, to start over somewhere, to have a life that isn't tied to my debts and my problems. Maybe I don't want a life that isn't tied to those things. The words hung in the air. The children, sensing something important, went very still. Why would you do that? Rowan's voice was rough. Why would you give up everything you have for us? Because I love you. The words formed in her mind, clear and terrifying. Because I love your children. Because this broken family has become my family, and I can't walk away even if I wanted to. But she couldn't say any of that. Not here, not now, not with 2 pairs of young eyes watching. Because it was the right thing to do, she said instead. Rowan stood abruptly and left the table, walking out into the cold without his coat. Through the window, Eliza could see him standing in the yard, shoulders shaking. Was he crying? Angry? Is Papa mad at you? Ivy whispered. I don't think so, honey. Then why did he leave? Because sometimes emotions were too big to fit inside a room. Because sometimes men who'd taught themselves not to feel anything had to walk away when the feelings became too much. He just needs some air, Eliza said. Finish your dinner. Later, after the children were in bed, Rowan found her washing dishes. I'm sorry, he said. For what? For walking out like that. For... He struggled with the words. No one's ever done something like that for me before. I didn't know how to. You don't have to explain. Yes, I do. He moved to stand beside her, taking the dish from her hands and setting it down. Eliza, that money was yours. Your independence, your future. And you just gave it away. I invested it. In what? A losing proposition? We're still $257 short. All you did was delay the inevitable. Maybe. Or maybe it bought us time to find another solution. There is no other solution. Then we'll lose. But at least we'll lose knowing we fought, that we didn't just roll over and let Hewitt take everything without a fight. Rowan's hands came up to her shoulders, holding her in place when she tried to turn away. Why are you like this? Why can't you just look out for yourself like a sensible person? Because I'm not a sensible person. If I were sensible, I would have stayed in Philadelphia and married some factory worker and had 6 babies and died at 40 from exhaustion. But I'm not sensible. I got on a train for a man I'd never met. I agreed to live with a widower I'd known for 5 minutes. I gave away my savings for a family that isn't even mine. She met his eyes. So no, I'm not sensible. But I'm here, and I'm not giving up. His grip on her shoulders tightened. Eliza. Whatever he was going to say was interrupted by a commotion outside. Hoofbeats again, but different this time. Frantic. Someone shouting. Rowan grabbed the rifle and yanked open the door. A man on horseback skidded to a stop in the yard, young, wild-eyed, covered in road dust. Fire! He shouted. Fire at the Widow Hale's place. We need every able body. Margaret Hale. Despite everything, Eliza's first thought was concern. How bad? Rowan called. Bad. The whole main house is going up. We need men with wagons, buckets, anything. Rowan was already moving, grabbing his coat. I'll get the wagon ready. Eliza, I'm coming. The children? Can come with us or stay here, but I'm coming. There was no time to argue. They hitched the wagon in record time, loaded it with every bucket they owned. The children, woken by the commotion, climbed in back without being told. Nobody was staying behind for this. The ride to the Hale property took 20 minutes that felt like hours. Other wagons converged from all directions, all heading toward the orange glow on the horizon. The scene was chaos. Margaret Hale's grand house, the one she'd been so proud of, the symbol of her status in Red Hollow, was engulfed in flames. People formed bucket brigades from the well, passing water hand to hand in a futile attempt to combat the inferno. Margaret stood in the yard in her nightclothes, face streaked with soot and tears. Silas Grady had his arm around her, looking lost. "Miss Hale!" Eliza jumped down from the wagon. "Are you hurt?" Margaret looked at her with eyes that didn't quite focus. "The lamp. I knocked over the lamp in my bedroom. I tried to put it out, but it spread so fast. Is everyone out? Any servants?" "I live alone. It's just me. It's just—" She looked at her burning house and seemed to crumble. "It's all gone. Everything my father built. Everything I have." Despite their history, despite the cruelty and the judgment, Eliza's heart twisted. She knew exactly what it felt like to lose everything. "You're alive," Eliza said firmly. "That's what matters. Houses can be rebuilt. Not by me. I have nothing. No family, no savings. The house was all I had." Silas tightened his grip on her shoulder but said nothing. Useless in a crisis, Eliza noted. Some things never changed. The bucket brigade worked through the night, but it was hopeless. By dawn, the grand house was a smoking ruin. People stood around in exhausted clusters, faces black with soot. Rowan found Eliza sitting on the back of their wagon, Ivy asleep against her shoulder. "We should head back," he said quietly. In a minute, she was watching Margaret, who sat on the ground staring at the ruins of her life. Silas hovered nearby, making ineffectual gestures of comfort. "I should say something to her," Eliza said. "You don't owe her anything." "No, but I know what it's like to have nowhere to go." She gently transferred Ivy to Rowan's arms and walked over to where Margaret sat. "Miss Hale." Margaret looked up, her face haggard. "Come to gloat?" "No. I came to tell you that the Morris family has a spare room. Anna Morris mentioned it at the general store. I'm sure they'd take you in until you figure things out. Why would you help me? After everything I said to you?" Eliza crouched down to her level. "Because when I arrived in Red Hollow with nothing, someone helped me, even though they didn't have to, even though it made their life more complicated." She paused. "What you said about me, about my situation, a lot of it was true. I am living with a man I'm not married to. I did arrive here with nothing. I am dependent on his charity. Then why, what?" "Because being desperate doesn't make you shameful. Being alone doesn't make you immoral. And needing help doesn't make you weak." Eliza stood. "The Morris place is 5 miles north. Tell them I sent you." She walked away before Margaret could respond. In the wagon on the way home, Caleb was uncharacteristically quiet. Finally, he said, "That was her house? The fancy lady who was mean to you?" "Yes." "And you helped her anyway?" "Yes." "Why?" Eliza thought about it. "Because being mean back doesn't fix anything. It just makes more meanness in the world." Caleb processed this. "Papa, is that true?" Rowan glanced at Eliza, something warm in his expression. "Yeah, son, that's true. Even when people deserve it? Especially then." They got home as the sun was rising, all of them exhausted and reeking of smoke. Eliza sent the children to bed and started heating water for washing. "Leave it," Rowan said. "It can wait. We're filthy." "Eliza, leave it. Sit down before you fall down." She did, too tired to argue. They sat at the table in the gray dawn light, two people who'd spent the night fighting someone else's fire. "What you said to her," Rowan began. "About being desperate and alone and needing help. About it not being shameful." "What about it?" "Did you mean it?" "Yes." "Even the part about living with me? About being dependent on my charity?" She looked at him directly. "It's true, isn't it? That's exactly what I'm doing." "No." His voice was firm. "You're not dependent on my charity. You earn your place here every single day. And as for living with me..." He stopped, then pushed forward. I don't want you living with me as my housekeeper anymore. Her stomach dropped. What? I want you living with me as my wife. The world tilted. Rowan, I know the timing is terrible. I know I'm about to lose this land and I have nothing to offer you, but I can't keep pretending this is temporary. Can't keep pretending I don't. He took a breath. I love you, Eliza. I think I have since you fixed Caleb's bird and didn't even make a fuss about it. Since you stood up to Margaret Hale in the general store. Since you gave away your money to buy us more time. You love me. She repeated it stupidly, her exhausted brain unable to process. I love you, and if you don't feel the same way, that's fine. You can stay here as long as you need to, no strings attached. But if there's any chance you might... I do. The words tumbled out. I do feel the same way. I love you too. The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise. Yeah? Yeah, but Rowan, this doesn't solve anything. We're still losing the land. You're still broke. I don't care. We'll figure it out together. That's what people do when they love each other. They figure it out. That's not very practical. The hell with practical. I've been practical my whole life. Look where it got me. He reached across the table and took her hand. Marry me, Eliza. Officially. Legally. So everyone in this town knows exactly what you are to me. I'm covered in soot. I smell like smoke. I haven't slept in 24 hours. Is that a yes? You're proposing in a burned cabin while we're both filthy and exhausted and about to be homeless. Is that a yes? She looked at their joined hands, his scarred from years of carpentry, hers rough from washing and work. Two people who'd been broken in different ways, finding their way toward something whole. Yes, she said. It's a yes. He kissed her then, and it tasted like smoke and exhaustion and hope, all mixed together. The news spread through Red Hollow faster than the fire that had destroyed Margaret's house. Rowan Vale was marrying his housekeeper. The scandal everyone had been whispering about was becoming respectable. Opinions were divided. Some people, like Anna Morris, were delighted. Others, like the women who'd visited with Margaret, were scandalized. Most people just shrugged. Frontier towns had seen stranger things. The wedding was set for the following Saturday at the small church on the edge of town. No fancy dress, no elaborate ceremony, just the two of them, the children, and whoever wanted to show up. Eliza spent the week in a daze of planning and worry. The marriage solved some problems, her reputation, the children's stability, the question of what she was doing there. But it didn't solve the biggest problem. They still owed Samuel Hewitt $257 they didn't have. On Thursday, 2 days before the wedding, Silas Grady knocked on their door. Rowan opened it with barely contained hostility. What do you want? To talk. Silas looked uncomfortable, hat in hands. May I come in? No. Rowan, please, I need to speak with Miss Mercer. It's important. Eliza appeared at Rowan's shoulder. It's fine. Let him in. Silas entered the cabin like he was entering enemy territory. His eyes took in the clean floor, the organized shelves, the children's drawings on the wall. Miss Mercer, it's Eliza, and in 2 days it'll be Mrs. Vale. So say what you came to say. Silas flinched. I came to apologize, and to give you this. He pulled an envelope from his coat. Eliza took it, suspicious. Inside was a bank draft for $300. Her hand started shaking. What is this? It's payment for the note, for Mr. Vale's mortgage. Silas looked at Rowan. I bought it from Hewitt this morning. Paid him what he was owed and then some to get him to sell. Rowan stepped forward. Why would you do that? Because Margaret told me what happened. How Eliza helped her after the fire, even though Margaret had been cruel to her. How she sent her to the Morris place, made sure she had somewhere to go. He looked at Eliza. She also told me what you said, about being desperate and alone not being shameful. So I realized something. What I did to you on that platform, it was shameful. Not you being there, me rejecting you like that in front of everyone. His voice roughened. I was embarrassed that I'd ordered a bride like some kind of commodity, embarrassed that Margaret might find out, so I humiliated you to save myself. Eliza said nothing. You could have destroyed me, Silas continued. Could have told everyone what kind of man I really am. Could have made sure Margaret knew exactly who she was marrying. But you didn't. You just survived. And then when Margaret lost everything, you helped her anyway. I didn't do it for you. I know. That's what makes it matter. He gestured to the bank draft. This doesn't make us even. Nothing can do that. But it's what I can do. Consider it payment for the passage I promised you, for the life you were supposed to have. Rowan took the draft from Eliza's trembling hands. This pays off the mortgage and then some. The extra is a wedding gift, or a down payment on starting over. Whatever you need. I don't know what to say, Eliza admitted. Say you'll forgive me, eventually, when you can. Silas turned his hat in his hands. Margaret and I aren't getting married. She called it off after the fire. Said she'd been so focused on status and appearances that she'd forgotten how to be a decent person. Said you reminded her what that looked like. He left after that, walking out into the spring sunlight that was finally starting to melt the last of the snow. Eliza and Rowan stood in the doorway, staring at the bank draft like it might disappear. Is this real? She whispered. It's real. We're not losing the land? We're not losing the land! She started laughing and couldn't stop, great gasping laughs that turned into sobs. Rowan pulled her against his chest, holding her while she shook apart with relief and joy and the release of weeks of crushing worry. We're going to be okay, he murmured into her hair. We're going to be okay. Saturday arrived cold and clear. Eliza wore the blue fabric they'd bought weeks ago, hastily made into a simple dress by Anna Morris, who'd appeared at their door with a sewing basket and a determination to help. The church was surprisingly full. Anna and her family, Mr. Patterson from the general store, some of Rowan's friends from the mill. Even Mr. Winters from the bank showed up, looking vaguely apologetic. Margaret Hale sat in the back, wearing a borrowed dress and an expression of cautious hope. When she caught Eliza's eye, she nodded. Not quite friendship, but maybe the beginning of understanding. The ceremony was short. The preacher kept it simple, probably sensing that neither Rowan nor Eliza had patience for long speeches. Do you, Rowan Vale, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. And do you, Eliza Mercer, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Eliza looked at Rowan. This man who'd offered her shelter when she had nothing, who'd defended her honor, who'd chosen her despite everything. She looked at Caleb and Ivy in the front row, watching with serious eyes. Her family now. Really, truly hers. I do. Then, by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. Rowan kissed her in front of everyone, and she didn't care who saw or what they thought. This was hers. This life, this family, this stubborn man with sawdust in his hair and kindness in his eyes. The reception was held at the Morris farmhouse, Anna having insisted despite Eliza's protests. There was food and music and dancing, and for the first time since arriving in Red Hollow, Eliza felt like she belonged. Ivy stuck to her side all day, holding her hand like she was afraid Eliza might disappear. Caleb was more reserved, but when they cut the cake, he whispered, I'm glad you're staying. Me too, honey. Me too. As evening fell, they returned to the cabin that was now officially Eliza's home. The children went to bed without protest, exhausted from the excitement. Rowan and Eliza stood in the main room, suddenly awkward with each other now that they were alone and married. So, Rowan said, so, you're my wife now. Seems that way. He crossed to her, taking her hands. I know this isn't what you imagined when you got on that train, some poor carpenter in a rough cabin with 2 broken kids and more problems than solutions. You're right, it's not what I imagined. She smiled. It's better. How do you figure? Because what I imagined was a transaction, a business arrangement with a stranger who'd written nice letters. This, she gestured around the cabin, this is real. The work is real. The love is real. The family is real. Even the problems are real. Especially those, but we'll handle them. Together. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her mouth. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. They stood like that for a long moment, just holding each other in the cabin that had seen so much grief and was finally learning to hold joy again. Spring came to Montana with reluctant grace. The snow melted, revealing brown grass that would eventually turn green. Trees budded. The creek behind the cabin swelled with runoff. Eliza planted a garden, vegetables mostly, but also some flowers because Ivy had asked for them. She hung curtains she'd sewn from fabric scraps. She filled the cabin with small touches that made it feel less like a shelter and more like a home. Rowan used the extra money from Silas to buy better tools, take on private carpentry jobs. Slowly, they started building savings again. Not much, but enough to feel secure, enough to breathe. Caleb's anger softened into something more manageable. He still had bad days, moments when grief ambushed him. But he also had good days now. Days when he laughed. Days when he called Eliza Mama without realizing it and didn't immediately look stricken. Ivy bloomed like one of the flowers in her garden. She talked more, smiled more, brought Eliza constant offerings of smooth stones and bird feathers and wildflowers. She had nightmares sometimes, but Eliza was always there to comfort her back to sleep. One evening in late May, Eliza stood at the window watching Rowan teach Caleb how to plane a board in the workshed. The boy's form was clumsy but earnest, and Rowan's patience was infinite. Ivy was at the table drawing a picture of their family. 4 stick figures in front of a cabin, all holding hands. "Is that us?" Eliza asked. "Yes, that's you, that's Papa, that's Caleb, and that's me." "It's beautiful, honey." Ivy looked up at her with those serious eyes. "Are you happy here?" The question caught Eliza off guard. "Yes, very happy. Why do you ask?" "Because before you came, nobody was happy, and now we are." She said it simply, like she was commenting on the weather. Eliza knelt beside her chair. "You know what? I'm happier here than I've ever been in my whole life. Even though we're not fancy like that lady with the big house? Especially because we're not fancy. Fancy doesn't matter. This..." She gestured around the cabin. "This matters. You and your brother and your papa. This is everything." Ivy hugged her then, fierce and sudden, and Eliza held her close. That night, after the children were asleep, Rowan found Eliza on the porch watching the stars. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, settling beside her. "I was thinking about that day on the platform, when Silas rejected me. Not exactly a pleasant memory. No. But I was thinking, if he hadn't rejected me, I never would have met you, never would have found this family, never would have known what it felt like to be chosen instead of settled for." Rowan took her hand. "I didn't choose you because I needed a housekeeper. I know, you chose me because you saw someone drowning and threw them a rope. And you grabbed it. Some people wouldn't have. Some people would have been too proud or too scared. I was both of those things, but I was also desperate enough to try anyway." They sat in comfortable silence, fingers intertwined, watching the stars wheel overhead. "You know what the best part is?" Eliza said finally. "What?" "I came west looking for someone to save me, and I found a family that let me save myself." Rowan squeezed her hand. "We saved each other. And maybe that was the truth of it. Not a fairy tale where one person rescued another. Not a story where love fixed everything instantly. Just 2 broken people who'd found each other in the rubble and decided to build something new together. It wasn't perfect. There were still hard days ahead. Rowan's grief flaring up unexpectedly, Caleb's anger surfacing in moments of stress, Ivy's nightmares, money troubles that never quite disappeared completely. But they faced those things together. 4 people who'd been lost separately learning to be found together. In the end, that's what family was. Not the people you were born to, but the people who chose to stay. Who fought for you when everything fell apart. Who saw you at your worst and decided you were worth it anyway. Eliza had traveled 2,000 miles to find a husband she'd never met. Instead, she'd found something infinitely more valuable. She'd found home. And in a small cabin at the edge of a frontier town, surrounded by pine trees and Montana sky, she discovered that sometimes the best things in life are the ones you never planned for, the ones you almost missed entirely, the ones worth fighting for.
I'm gonna steal it. We just see G-Man with his arms open, getting ready to catch it. I wonder how much just that pod costs. I bet it's cost a lot because of the mission that I did.
For sure.
But I'm talking like homeless people cost, like how, like when they take copper wires and shit. Like how much would it cost? I would be so scared to shoot propellant out like that when your fucking parachutes are like tethered like that. Oh, Megan's still here. Megan,
Passing through 1,000 feet.
Probably not much copper in there. It's heavy. Look, it's my backyard. They probably use special wire.
Holy homie owns the ocean.
True. No, I came back a couple minutes ago. Are you home now, Megan? Ooh, what a pretty little camera of this. The colors are nice. Did they put a filter on it? Thank God, though. Apart from this is worth thousands. True. Nar, are you still out there? There's no way. Oh, they did it.
Splashdown confirmed.
Copy splashdown. Waiting on VLDR.
Splashdown confirmed at 7:07 p.m. Central Time.
Huge.
Pacific Time. From the pages of Jules Verne to a modern-day mission to the moon, a new chapter of the exploration of our celestial neighbor is complete.
That's my pool.
Back on Earth.
I guess I'll just join NASA and let y'all know. I had stuff in lab. Maybe the music isn't what we need right now.
Officer reports the vehicle is stable 1.
Oh my God, Chandler.
We still will be deploying the crew module uprighting system to maintain that orientation.
This camera sucks balls.
For integrity
Is this the airplane again?